back, relax, the show is live. From the start straight to your vibe. AC Infinity, the name you trust. Cannabis talk, no need to fuss. Knowledge flows like a sweet blunt roll. High vibes and wisdom take control. Let's go from the stash. Highly educational. AC Infinity. Cannabis sensational.
We're back.
Welcome.
We're
back,
back, boys. Week
Every
after
week.
week.
Every
Let's
week.
get it on. Feels pretty good, boys. Great to see you guys. Great to see everybody in the chat, man. Huge shout out to everybody for tuning in. Huge shout out to ACI for putting us on. Welcome back to
Putting up with
another
us.
episode of Highly Educational. We got a banger today, don't we, boys?
My hat's all weird, like.
Yeah.
I actually like that hat. The red and the blue is a good look for you.
Thank you. I got the blue
Yep.
Stone of Success tee,
Banger.
sweatshirt tee to match it.
I like
Gang,
it.
gang. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, man,
Oh,
we are here
I like
for a
Chris's shirt,
special day. Everybody knows one of the most important days of the year, talking about genetics on AC Infinity's channel.
Genetics,
And
baby.
we've been teasing we're going to do it. I know everybody, the anticipation, like, oh, it's Tuesday. Tuesday's coming. Yeah. Big day's here. Genetics. So,
Big days here. Big days here. And it's a great conversation to have. And as everybody knows, we are professionals at breeding. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation. No, full stop. No, this is a beginner's guide or a beginner's look to the basics of breeding and genetics and kind of just, how to find your way around if you so wanted to start an adventure in breeding. So I'm really excited about this one because this is exactly me. And I feel like I'm going to get a lot out of this episode, even though I'm part of it.
Yeah. I mean, seeds can be expensive, right? Unless you create your own. If you create you can save money. So I know a lot of people create their own seeds in order to save money. So they don't have to go through the cloning process. They don't have to go out and buy seeds. They just make their own and then they plant them run after run. And I mean, one plant can get thousands of seeds, So really could do one run and be set for life potentially with those same genetics. So yeah, I'm excited for this one. We're going to go over the basics of breeding. We'll get into some pheno hunting, kind of growing the plants after they're pollinated, testing genetics if we have time. So we've got a jam-packed one tonight for you.
yeah, man, I think this is a great one for those of us who have wanted to dabble into this space. It's really fun. If you've been growing for a while, especially, it's really fun to create your own seeds, even if they're just ones that you've done from self-pollination or ones that you've done actual formal breeding with. It's cool, man. And I think us getting into this beginner side of things will help you at least be equipped with enough tools to get started and dabble in this a little bit.
Totally agree. I think the first thing we should start is like as basic as it gets, and that's kind of just males and females.
Dudes and chicks, bro.
Dudes and chicks. I've got a tent right now full of some femmes, but some regs. Shout out to my boy Swank. I've got some GMO crossed with papaya runts. And as of right now, I am looking for the telltale sign of females. That calyx with those two stigmas. Is that correct, Christopher? Stoma.
Stigma, pistils.
Yeah, I wanted to get it right. The calyx coming out of the calyx is the
we're going to
stigma.
share some knowledge. Yeah,
that's what I thought. The two stigmas coming out, and contrary to popular belief, you don't actually have to be in flower to see and determine sex. I was going to put a joke in there, but I didn't think it was appropriate. You can actually figure it out based on the stress that you're going to apply to your plants. Probably about week 3-4 of veg. That's where I'm at right now, and trying to find females is relatively easy. You can either see the ball hanging out, or you've got the calyx with the two stigmas. So males and females. The three of us have all done videos on males and females.
Yeah, so the cannabis plant's dioecious. You grow the plant and it's either going to be have male characteristics with pollen sacs, or females with the hairs, pistils, and flowers, buds, right? So a lot of people just grow the females or kill off the males. But when you're breeding, males are useful, right? There's different types of breeding as well. There's inbreeding, where you're basically working the line. You're finding a male and female, pollinating it, those seeds, and then using those seeds to create the next pollination and go down generation to generation, F1, F2, F3, F4. There's back crossing where you can basically take genetics and cross it back to a parent. Some people cross it back to themselves. There's reversing where you have, for example, a plant that's a female and you're able to change it. You're forcing it to produce male pollen sacs. And actually the pollen that comes from those pollen sacs are feminized. You can create feminized seeds with it. And then there's selfing as well. And I know Rob wanted to talk about selfing.
I mean, a little bit. Not necessarily love the self-pollination side, but people, I mean, honestly, who want to keep genetics around, that seems to be the go-to method. You know, when you see people who get autoflowers and they say you can't clone them, true, but a lot of people are just self-pollinating them, and that's usually with colloidal silver. And that's something that people just can get on Amazon or anywhere and essentially just impregnate your plant. So you're going to take that same genetic and just make it hermaphrodite, I guess would be the word, intersex traits, and it's going to flip over and it's going to be pregnant. And oftentimes people will just basically get a whole stock of seeds doing that. It's not necessarily the goal to breed with those sometimes, but that is oftentimes the go-to to keep these genetics, and that would be considered an S1. So I know some people will try to keep genetics around and copycat on people, we'll say, and just use that as their way to get clone-only genetics out there. Yeah, P. And it works, don't get me wrong, but in a sense, a lot of people, at least from what I've gathered, a lot of people do swear by having more intersex traits if you do that. You can potentially risk not having the strongest of genetics. Now, Chris, have you done any inbreeding, not just inbreeding, but self-pollination with any of your genetics,
No.
like the ones you've worked on?
No, I've just done the inbreeding. So, kind of, I'm sure we'll get into it later on, kind of the pheno hunting that I did and using a male and female and doing the pollination process and all that stuff. But no, I haven't done actual selfing or any reversing or back crossing.
I actually got
Yeah.
busted selfing oh, sorry. Sorry. Fuck. My bad.
Nothing happened. So when you're doing this, essentially, you're going to maintain some of the consistency and preserve the traits from some of these genetics, but not all the traits that you're going to be getting are usable in other things. And there's, you know, when you're looking at these different terms, you look at dominant traits and recessive traits. And I think this is where you're looking at, do you want to self-pollinate or do you want to use one of these males or females for a breeding project? Now, Chris, being a little more experienced than myself, he inspired me to actually get into it. What are some things that you would use as an example for dominant traits?
Well, it depends if it's male or females, right? So if I'm looking at a female, you talking about like characteristics to look for, or
Characteristics that would be dominant in this sense. So, like, let's say a tall plant with certain terps, and those terps are more dominant on that side. You think that those would come out more from the mother side or the father side? Those would be dominant traits versus recessive traits, ones that come from the genetic breeding.
yeah, dominant versus recessive. So some of these traits you're going to see most every time you pop the beans, right? Other ones are going to be recessive where they'll show up every now and then. Is that kind of what you're aiming for? Like
Yeah,
sometimes like
well, like the
color, for example, could
recessive.
be a recessive trait to where, you not every time it's going to show that purple color, for example. Or if it's dominant, every time it should show, just about every time it should show as a purple color, for example.
Yeah, and this, I never even say the word right, but this would be is it alleles or alleles? Essentially
Alleles, I
recessive
think is how you
alleles.
pronounce it. I believe so.
Yeah, yeah. So this is from watching one of Zaza's videos. Is when you get the two copies of those that come together from each parent. That's when you'll see the recessive traits coming through. So it's like when you're doing a self-pollination, you're kind of get what you get and don't throw a fit, so to speak. But when you're doing the breeding, you can kind of look for things that are dominant traits or recessive traits and try to play around and see what you can get out of this mix to create something maybe even more unique than what you had originally, or something that pulls a trait out and gets rid of another trait that you don't want in the mom or in the dad.
And when you're looking for something in particular and you are selecting based on specific traits, it's called selective breeding. It's one way I go about it. Another way, which is a bit controversial, is pollen chucking. If you guys in the chat have heard about pollen chucking, it gets a bad rep. There's some people who are against it. There are some people who are for it. Basically, I guess in layman's terms, trying to explain it as simple as possible. Pollen checking is just spreading a bunch of pollen onto genetics and seeing what you can get out of it. Really, no clear goal in mind. So whether or not that's a bad thing, I mean, some dedicated breeders say that's a bad thing. You should always be selecting and trying to make genetics better versus just loading up plants with pollen and then seeing what you get out of it could potentially make the gene pool worse. So yeah, selective breeding versus pollen chucking. That's definitely something you want to be aware of, whichever way you go on that avenue.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Well,
that's
and
a big thing too. Oh, go
transparency is
ahead.
going to be key too. I think it's really important if you're chucking for whatever particular reason, don't label it, don't sell it, and don't try to pass it off as something that it's
Yeah,
not,
that's
because
at-home
you're not
experiment.
going to be growing a whole lot of fire. You're going to be growing a lot more stress, and that's something you want to avoid.
Yes. Yes, very well put, actually. That in a situation where you're doing the pollen checking, that is just to experiment things. When you're kind of letting the plants naturally breed and do what they're doing. I just recently did that with the surebangers. I just put out males and females, and I'm just letting them do their thing and see what it does. There is a place for that if you're just trying to see what you can get out of the room. But when you're trying to do something to maintain the genetics and make sure that you don't get some of these negative traits, you do want to have selective breeding. I think that's where you look at prime examples at Chill Out OG. Shout out to Mr. Grow It over here. He's got things where he can tell you out of both genetics that he looked for, and sure as shit, those things came through. And that's the selective breeding where he saw something he liked and wanted to maintain that from one parent, take another trait from another parent, and he's been able to find it. And some, like the Briscoe G side, will lean a little bit more on certain phenotypes. And the phenotype, essentially, if you're not familiar, we'll talk about that a little more shortly. But that being like the physical trait based on your environment for that genetic. So the phenotype that pigeons had was night and day color wise what I had, but the flavor was right on par, where mine leaned more on towards the brisker, I guess. But it's like you don't know until you do that selective breeding of what you're aiming for. If you're just randomly throwing stuff out there, you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get, and you gotta kind of just be okay with that.
That's where you're going to see variation amongst generations, right? So when you do that first initial cross, you find your keeper female, you find your keeper male, and you've got two parents there, P1, P2. You cross those, and the offspring is F1, the first generation. Okay, a lot of people say, start
There's
with a
no true
land
F1s,
race.
so
What's that?
there's no true F1s though.
Yeah, because it's polyhybrids of, we don't want to get into them advanced talk about that, but if you're using a land race and a hybrid and you cross, it can be an F1. But those F1s, those seeds that you plant, there's going to be different characteristics that you see in each one of those seeds, right? It's going to have a huge variance. Now, when you find your keepers out of that male and female, and you pollinate the male, pollinate the female, and get the offspring of that, that's F2 generation, which is actually said to open up the gene pool a little bit more. It'll tap into the grandparents' traits. And then it's not until you get down to F3 generation, F3, F4, F5, where you see kind of more consistency amongst the phenos. The Chill Out OG, I was at F3. I just completed F4. So now I'm at the point where I am about to plant these F4s and start hunting again, see if I could continue to find what I'm looking for in the characteristics and just kind of stabilize it more, bringing it down to that next generation.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's refining the genetic. You get to that point when you've done the selective breeding, you can go to the refining process. Myself, I had an accidental breeding project, and what I'm trying to do now is not accidental, but pretty much pollen chucking. And in this case, I want to be able to breed out this negative trait. And so I'm doing the interbreeding, which think I'm going to quit, to be honest with you. But Chris was explaining to me you can breed out some of these traits or breed for some of these traits. And that's where, again, this back crossing, where to get to the point where he's gotten down to this F4s, he's dialing in the genetics that he's looking for. He's dialing in the actual smoke. And that's where it takes more time. This isn't something you could just do in an open space. I'd recommend right off the jump, having a separate tent is huge. A whole separate area is mandatory, really, but a separate tent at least is huge because pollen goes around everywhere, and you can't have a controlled area if you don't have the ventilation dialed down, maybe a filter over the vent, and a tent to separate it.
Yeah, I actually want to give a huge shout out to Vader OG. He posted a video not 3-4 days ago, and it was epic. And I've been following him for years. He's an OG. He has
Vader
the
OG.
chambers. Vader OG. He has the chambers, and essentially he's got a ebb and flow, or a drain to waste system where he can remove the water and keep everything clean and sterile while also feeding the plants. but he screws in, like he screws shut his chambers. It's completely plywood, little plexiglass window peeping hole, and he has a chain pulley system where he can shake the baskets of the males as well and get all that activity in there while keeping it entirely encased inside the chamber, which I think is epic. The fact that he's got it screwed shut. That's just the level of care you have to take, because when pollen goes airborne, that shit'll go anywhere. It'll go through your vents, it'll go through your fans, it'll travel through your house. So it's like trying to keep things clean and sterile. It has to be a quarantine area. It has to be sectioned off on its own to ensure you don't have anything contaminated that you don't want contaminated, because that'll ruin your garden.
And I think that's where the issue comes into play. When you're trying to do something, get down to an F4, you need to have the dedicated space to it. Salute to Chris for going that far on being a home grower and still maintaining his crop. Because I know majority of breeders that I know barely have a harvest for themselves. They just breed seeds. They don't have a grow for themselves for actual flower, because it's just too much of a headache to try to maintain both. I mean, a perpetual grow, if you saw that episode a couple weeks back, that may be tough enough for some people. Imagine a perpetual grow with a proximity mine in the room. You know what I'm saying? It's tough.
Yeah, keeping them separate is definitely key. A way to kind of alleviate accidental pollination would be to I do every other run. I'll do a breeding run, clear that out, do a run for flower, only females. Done with that, go back to a breeding run. So I'll do every back and forth, because I have done runs before where it was breeding run and in a different room, a completely different room on a completely different side of the house. There were females, and pollen traveled that whole way. It went through the ventilation system, for example, and they can get MERV. I think it's MERV 13 air filters will collect pollen. Could be wrong on that. Don't quote me, but there is certain air filters that'll kind of collect that and prevent it from going throughout your whole house. But yeah, for the most part, there's chambers that can be built to kind of separate things to make sure that you aren't accidentally pollinating plants. Because nobody really wants seeds in their buds when they're not trying to get seeds in their buds.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big reason why I think having multiple tents is the easiest way. You could build something if you're a DIY guy, but the propagation tent would be a nice one for your small area, and then a 4x2 just for messing around. I have my 4x2 that's like my stress test tent. That's another part. So I think we'll follow down the line and get more into the phenotypes and genotypes, but I think we'll do the thought process just to nail this one in your mind, that just because you bred it once and you got the seeds does not mean that you're going to grow that out and it's going to be totally viable.
And just to talk about the amount of pollen that is actually released, one thing I learned going to Utah State University, get my cannabis cultivation certificate, is each one of those pollen sacs opens up and you see what looks like little bananas in there, right? And each one of those nanners, or stamen is what it's called, has 350,000 grains of pollen that get released. Massive amount, right? So it's so easy to go find. I have a video here I'll show you in a few minutes here, where you can just see it going airborne and it just floats around so easily. So yeah,
That's
uh,
insane.
yeah, so much, so much. As far as ways to pollinate, I think there's quite a few people who are wondering, how can you pollinate? A couple different ways to go about it. One of the ways is to just put a male in with a female plant, let them do their thing, right? You've got the air circulations with the fans going on. Eventually, pollen's going to drop from that male. The oscillating fan's going to take it, and it'll hit the females eventually. Other people will actually take that male plant and shake it over females. And that's what I like to do, because I
Let
think
it
it's
bust
so
all over.
effective to just get it all over the place, right? But the downside is it makes your area messy, super messy, pollen's everywhere. Like I said, it goes airborne. It can travel throughout your whole house. And then cleaning it up afterwards is just, once you're done with a run where the tent is just, it's yellow. You got to wipe that down and clean it. You can also use just like either a Q-tip, or some people use makeup brush or a little paintbrush to dab it within the pollen and then dab it onto the actual plant. That's another way to go about it as well. So I figure I'd throw out those couple ways that I'm familiar with as far as ways to kind of pollinate the plant.
Yeah, yep. The way that I did it recently that was good, I used a paintbrush, just a little small model paintbrush for like a model car, and that worked good. I think the shaking method definitely is solid if you're like a lot of breeders before, they would have one plant they'd cross a bunch of other stuff with. You remember that, like the line? I don't see it as much anymore, but it would be like the runts line and it's runts crossed with 50 different things, or like the Sherbanger crossed with 50 different things. I think that's the easiest way to go about it for a lot of people because they can go in and just shake that healthy plant, you know? Baby got back. And at that point, it's solid, it works, but the accuracy of making sure everything is properly painted, so to speak, or it's on there. Like you want to get the most yield of these seeds as well, not just get seeds. You know, that's also a thing as well, in my opinion.
I prefer the flower girl method, where you just
Yes.
yeah, it's all about looks, elegance.
They call it pollen chucking. It's flower girl.
That's my that's my chucking. I pollen chuck. So when it comes to storing pollen, how would one do that? Because quite frankly, I have no idea. I would probably just toss it in a fridge.
Well, first of all, before storing the pollen,
Oh,
kind of
forgot
when to
where we were.
pollinate. I think a question would
good
be
idea.
when to pollinate the plant.
It's a good
right?
idea.
Yeah. For when to pollinate your female plant after that you've got the pollen. Have you extracted the pollen, or you take, I guess, whatever method you're doing, because we did just say shaking it, painting it, however. When would you do it, Chris?
Well, I think Irie Genetics said it the best. He says, pollinate when the plant looks horny. It's like, it's really just when you've got all those pistils coming up. And it's usually around day 28 of flower, but it's going to depend on, when you flip, if it's showing pistils at all, when a plant actually starts to flower. But for me, it's roughly around day 28. And that's usually what Subcool had mentioned. That's the one thing I learned from him, around
Okay,
day 28 of flower. And that's usually when I'm hitting it with the pollen. Now, as far as how to collect and store the pollen, if you just don't want to shake the plant over or even keep the male in the same area, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. And I actually have some B-roll here, which I can show
Let's
show
see
you
the
how
B-roll.
to collect
Cool.
some pollen here. So here is a male plant that I have, and I'm just basically dropping it onto a screen. Those keef collectors, basically a trim tray, just dropping it down, and the pollen is going right through that screen. So I'm trying to just drop it onto the screen to get those pollen sacs kind of open up and that pollen to hopefully drop down. Now some of it's going airborne. You've got these pollen sacs residual here, just kind of running it over the screen to see if any more pollen will kind of fall down. And then you can see there's the pollen right there. I'm just able to scrape it up. There's no pollen sacs within it. So it's kind of a lot. It's probably a more cleaner method than the other methods I'm about to show you, but kind of collecting it up with a card and then eventually putting into a little plastic bag. Some people are going to put it into a plastic bag, put it in the fridge. That's usually what I did. Some people put it in glass jars. Here's another way to go about it: put it into a bag, kind of prevent the pollen from going everywhere. Just put it into a bag and shake it into the bag. However, you've got the pollen sacs in there. Now, there's some question about whether or not that those pollen sacs being in there is going to spoil the pollen at all. That's up for debate. Now, here's another way to go about it: is just dropping it onto a piece of tinfoil, so a flat surface, for example, dropping it down, shaking it on there, manually separating these pollen sacs individually. See, I'm going in there and trying to get every little individual pollen sac out of that. It's going to be a little bit time consuming, but other than that, just cut off the tinfoil, put it into the bag, and then I've got a bunch of pollen within the bag. Now, as far as the pollinating here on this method right here, like I said, Q-tip, taking a Q-tip and then putting it all over the buds. I don't remember what day that plant was on, but yeah, I mean, up the close up, which you're about to see, you can see like the pollen just easily goes airborne. Like you can just see it like just coming off that plant so easily.
It's getting
And
sensual
yeah,
over
just
here.
dabbing it around as much as possible. I know there's other people who use the makeup brushes. There's more bristles on there. It'll give you more kind of surface area. This is just a male plant that I have. I wanted to show. You could see clearly there's pollen sacs on there, not flowers. So just to see what a male plant looks like. And this one was super vigorous. It was trained real well. And everything just restarted there.
Beautiful.
And
Dude,
that was,
great,
yeah,
great work.
yeah, it was good stuff there. But yeah, that actually was old footage. These days, I'm just shaking the plant over the females in order to get the pollen as much covered as possible, because I feel like that definitely does help with the yield of seeds that you can get.
It got hot in here,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. We just saw
Personally,
some babies being made.
I use the gym sock method.
Oh, yeah.
So pheno. Did we pheno and geno hunting? We kind of touched on the pheno a little bit in regards
We did a
to
little
the
bit.
treat, but we didn't, or the traits in relation to your environment, but we didn't really touch on geno hunting. He's a good guy. Do we want to touch on it just a
Gino,
minute?
shout out to Gino, man.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it a little bit. The phenotypes, everyone's always like, I'm pheno hunting. I'm pheno hunting. What pheno am I getting? And that is going to be describing the physical traits, the traits that that particular cultivar has in your environment based on the genetics. So there's going to be a variety of phenotypical expressions that you can get from different genetics. But usually, if you're able to lock one in, that's the keeper. That's where your phenotype is the focus. Chris, you want to dabble in on genotype?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way I feel like you can explain genotype is just the total possible characteristics that you can get from genetics. And then, like you mentioned, Geno is kind of like the actual genetics, the actual characteristics that you get from growing in your environment. So I think that's kind of the easiest way. Like the Geno is all the possible traits that you can possibly get, and Pheno is what you actually get from growing it in your environment.
Well, and then there's the third one that's not talked about as much, but it doesn't play as big of a factor, I feel like, in genetics. Would that be chemotypes? Talking about the chemical
Oh, yeah,
group.
yeah.
So that's a little bit more advanced, but then it's all these variables that you look at with your genetics before you do that selective breeding. You're looking deep into the gene pool. You don't just grab, the great granddaughter and start going crazy because you don't know what recessive traits potentially or dominant traits may come in further down the line from a great relative down the road. So knowing your genealogy is super, super important, more than I realized myself. I just went by good taste and good growth, and then I'm seeing that's not the move. You start to understand some of those concepts as you dabble and get deeper into doing the breeding for yourself, or you learn from things like this.
Yeah.
Well
Ye-
done, gentlemen. I think
Giveaway
we should do a
time?
giveaway.
Let's give some
Oh,
shit
great
away.
minds.
Let's do it.
Great minds, baby. Let's do it.
When you
Let's
guys
do it.
read, I have to get a cigar.
Yeah, sure thing. Sure thing. Seems like we got ourselves a doozy. So all you got to do here is answer, put a letter in the chat. What does phenotype refer to in breeding? A, the plant's brain. B, the plant's genetic code. C, the plant's root system. D, the physical traits of the plant. Put the letter in the chat. You have about 20 seconds to respond. And the winner has an opportunity to win a... What did we say this was for? The
Uncore A5.
We're going to do it right away. Love it.
And humidity dome. So the AC Infinity heat map and then
Love
the
it.
dome as well.
Love
Awesome
it.
kit there.
Yeah, fantastic. 5 seconds. Done. The answer was D, ladies and gentlemen. The physical traits of the plant. That's fantastic. Now, the plant's genetic code, I saw a lot of B's in there. A lot of B's in there. The plant's genetic code. What would that be? Christopher?
It's kind of more what I was explaining as a genotype, right? So
That's right.
everything.
So just a
all
little
the
bit of
possibilities
confusion.
are from the genetics.
That's right. That's right.
I didn't
so
create these
pheno
questions, but I think that's what they're referring to.
Yeah. No, I just a
There's
lot,
in me.
so a
I'm
lot of
back.
people
Hey,
said B.
guys.
A lot of people said B. So I just wanted to explain. You're seeing the genotype because it's not in relation to
Spitzig.
the environment and what's going on around it. So it's fantastic. I didn't see who it was. Oh, there it is. Zachary Spitzig. I don't know if I can say that
Spitzig.
live on the internet on the ACI channel, but I did. Don't forget to show yourself logged in on. Take a picture of yourself logged in on YouTube so they can see that it's you, and email giveaways@aci.com.
ACinfinity.com.
Thank you. I knew it. Yep. Thank you. I knew it didn't sound right.
Yes, giveaways at
ACinfinity.com.
ACinfinity.com just to prove that you are who you are. You said you are. If you wasn't, then why would you say you are?
Yes. But if I wasn't, but anyways, if you didn't win tonight, you can always win by heading on over to
I apologize about the AC Infinity.
USA and Canada only, folks. You heard that here first. Good thing we knew the winner. Hopefully they were in the USA or Canada. But if you didn't win and you would like to win, go to acinfinity.com. Use promo code THESTASH15. You'll save a few dollars off at checkout, and you can get yourself anything over there with a little discount. So huge shout out to ACI, huge shout out to the winners. Thank you guys for participating. What are we jumping into next, gentlemen?
Chris, you're the ringleader.
Oh,
Little Chris and the East Side Boys.
characteristics to look for, right? When you're doing that pheno hunting, like we talked about, pheno hunting, gene hunting, whatever you want to call it, right? When you're selective breeding, you're looking for characteristics. So, for example, I started out with Brisker OG and I started out with Pakistan Valley. That's how I created my cross of what I named Chill Out OG. And so I was looking for certain characteristics within the Brisker OG and certain characteristics within the Pakistan Valley. Now, you can look for different things within male and female plants. So the Pakistan Valley was the female that I used. So what was I looking for? Well, I was really like the effect. I want to make sure I had that good effect, or narcotic effect. That was pretty much number one for me, was the effect. There was also kind of the taste, smell that people look for. Whatever you're looking for that comes within that genetic. What I got out of it was more of like I got some citrusy, earthy, and then some a little bit of fruity sweet as well in some of the phenos that I ended up getting. Color, some people look for color. People look for density. They look for I'm just rapid firing here. There's so many different things you look for.
Freestyle.
Did I say color? Did I say flower
Vigor.
stacking? What else?
Like
Vigor,
the
It's going to be
overall.
different for everyone. It's going to be different
resistance
for everyone,
to
right?
disease, resistance to pests, things like that.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing is look at all of the characteristics in the gene pool, and that's where you honestly start that selective breeding process. You're looking at some things that, okay, I live in an area, prime example, Chris lives in the area that's dry, so he's looking for these certain traits. I live in an area that the temperature fluctuates pretty consistently, so I need something that can really handle the temperature fluctuations. That's going to be one of my starting points. But then you go down that list of characteristics and all these traits, and you can really breed for these traits. You may not find the initial mom or dad for it, but you can really get to the point where you have a nice grasp on what the potential of getting that cross would be based on that selective breeding. Now, myself, I'm looking for flavor alone, but then I do that and then I don't realize that the genetics that I'm crossing it with, flavor for flavor, may cross for good flavor, but growth don't cross well. They don't, it's hermaphroditing like crazy. It's got these traits that I don't want. It's got weird lengthy veg times because it's a short squatty plant when it wasn't before. These are things that now I'm getting its great great aunt or great great uncle's traits out of it that I didn't want, but that's what you get when you don't select a breed for proper traits that you're looking for.
And being in an area like mine, I noticed, Chris, you got it backwards. There you go. That's we're good. For me, breeding if I'm going to be looking for specific traits, I want something that's going to take my laziness and accept it as a reality. I want something that's going to take my feeding regimen and is going to be fine with it. It's going to take my environmental temperatures and be fine with it. There can be a swing, an unfortunate swing with temperatures. It's just the way it is around here. If it can't handle that and it's finicky, that's a no bueno. That's not going to cut it here because I don't want extra headaches. I want it to be simple. So yeah, feeding regimen is huge for me. When it comes to breeding, it's going to have to be able to take whatever I throw at it. And when you're listing off traits for what people are looking for, it's going to be different for everyone. Someone who maybe someone's looking more for an effect over flavor. Then they're clearly looking for something different than Rob, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be specific to you. I want something that's trainable. I want something that's tight, something where I can use the nodes, I can split it, I can train it, I can turn it into whatever way I want. So it's going to be specific to you. So you ask yourself, what do you want, and how do you want your plant to provide with it? Is really the big thing.
But it's just like, when you're a kid and you go to a Burger King or one of these shitty fast food places that rip up your stomach and you had the machines, you're like, I'm going to mix all these sodas together, like slush machines. Sometimes they're great, right? You find a unique flavor. Other times they're absolute dog shit. So throwing too many things we've got so many hybrids of hybrids of hybrids of hybrids that the crossing nowadays, you really have to be careful with the traits you think you're going to get based on what you see in that phenotypical expression you're getting for this particular parent. It's not guaranteed. That's where how Chris is kind of doing the dialing in, the refining the genetic by getting down to an F4. That's where you have to do a little more work for these traits. So you can't guarantee if you just find red and blue, you're getting purple. It's not guaranteed, but it gives you that starting point to work with at least.
Yeah, and a lot of people when they're doing the pheno hunting also stress testing. We talk about stress testing after you create the seeds, planting those new seeds, and then stress testing to make sure you don't get hermaphrodites. But really, which of your keeper phenos shouldn't have any hermaphrodite traits, right? You shouldn't be able to blast it with light. Then all of a sudden, a bunch of nanners show up, intersex traits show up. You shouldn't flip to flower, start to see pistils and flower development. Then all of a sudden, you see pollen sacs of the nodes. You don't want to use those in your line, really. You don't want to keep those and use those at all, because those traits, those intersex traits, are more likely to show in the offspring. And that's one of the reasons why pollen chucking is frowned upon, because people could just be taking these and then you get the result could be all these hermaphrodites that come out of it. And if people are just releasing those without testing, which we're going to talk about a little bit later here, it's just the end customer gets screwed. You
Yeah.
don't want to spend your time, effort, all the energy growing these plants only to find out you flipped a flower and then all of a sudden there's pollen sacs in those, you're going to throw them away. Or you get all the way 3 weeks into flower, 4 weeks into flower, and there's all of a sudden nanners all over there and spilling pollen all over to all your female plants.
Busting all over everything.
So, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
one thing you want to definitely avoid hermaphrodites or plants with intersex traits.
Yeah, and I think that's where stress testing is basically you don't want to push your like I was being an idiot, man. For this past year and a half, I've been doing stress tests, and I'm putting him in ridiculous situations that no one would have him in. And I realized only this year that I need to put them in those worst case scenarios. Power goes out for X amount of time, influx of light or lack of light, temperature swings, things like that. I shit you not, 115 degrees in my tent, making my bedroom unsleepable because that's where I put it to do the stress testing. And it was just such a bad situation, but I was able to see, these plants do show signs of lack of heat resistance, so to speak. But I'm not realistically going to have my temperature ever that high. So your stress tests need to be realistic to your environment, so to speak, but you also want to take them to some extremes. Now, the reason we haven't dropped our collab that we're doing with Swank Genetics is because for this last year, it's been finding the right stuff and then doing testing. And I think that's the big difference also with Chill at OG. I was up Chris's ass about it. I'm like, dude, drop it, bro. Drop it. Mine was great. Drop it. He's like, nah, I got to dial it in. I got to make sure it's good. But when you're going to take something that's your home project, like your home meal, you can't just have a random, not even written down recipe to put your meal out to the world. You got to have it tight and refined. And I think that's the difference between just a quick beginner home breed versus taking that genetic and refining it and taking it to the next level.
100%. And we've seen incidences where, breeding has or testing hasn't been adequate enough. And you find unfortunate circumstances where an abundance of growers end up finding those traits. I remember a particular incident with Zaza where he was kind of misinterpreted, or maybe not, however you'd like to take it, in regards to how he tested his genetics, and does not believe that you should rely upon the community to test your genetics. You should have your shit right before you release it and before anyone else has the opportunity to quote unquote test it. You should have it figured out. You should have already have thrown the kitchen sink at it to be able to determine that it's stable and it's ready for any environment. And so, there's a number of ways to test, but we've seen where circumstances have it where people just simply haven't tested it enough, or in some cases tested it indoors or outdoors and
Only
then found out
outdoors.
that when it goes into the opposite environment, it does not do very well. And that can have some detrimental effects. And not only that, is if for any reason, if those genetics don't show intersex traits in the first go round, there's nothing to say that later on, when you're using unstable genetics, that you're going to find these traits in your later breeds, or your later crosses. So they need to be stable, they need to be tested so that you're not finding any hermaphroditic traits.
And there are
Yeah.
some folks out there, some breeders who say that F1s shouldn't be released. They're like, F1s shouldn't exist. The reason why is because there isn't that stability. You've got, a female and a male, the parents, and that initial cross, what you get from the F1s is going to be so diverse that you could come across these hermaphrodite plants, these intersex traits. And that's not good on the customer, right? Same thing with F2. Like I said, it opens up the gene pool a little bit. You're tapping into even the grandparents' characteristics. So F3, F4 is typically what it said. Now I see the value in releasing, and this is a debate again of whether or not F1s, F2s should actually be released or not. I have released them and they're long gone, but it's also can be a positive because you're able to tap into those genetics more than you would if they were F4 or F5, where they're more stable and they're all showing the same uniformity, So
Yeah.
you've got
Vader
different
called those
opinions
breeder
there.
packs. They weren't even labeled F1s. They were called breeder packs. F1s were. Chris, do you have any knowledge on why that is? Because honestly, now that you're explaining and talking a little bit more about it, I'm thinking it's so you can hunt and you could find that original piece, then you could take that further. You know what I'm saying? Like why?
I don't know.
I
I never heard of that.
I remember this This was years ago now, man. I remember we had this sit down and conversation in regards to you releasing your genetics and whether or not you should release the F1s or not. And I remember sitting down and never being presented this question before. Remember thinking, why wouldn't you? Because these are still Pakistan Valley and Brisker OG. No matter what, no matter which way you shape it, F1 to 4 and farther, there's still those two basic genetics. Those two mom and dads have some incredible variables that I think even through your few years but yet limited experience with it, I think there's traits in there that are maybe you haven't even discovered yet, or that are available to a level that could be exploited even more. So that's why I think F1s need to come in there, because Brisker OG and Pakistan Valley have never been in my conversation before until you brought them in. So it's like, now I'm like, wow, okay, I would like to get this as well. But do I want the exact same thing that Chris had, or do I want to express this in my own way? And I think that's the joy of it, is you should be able to do that. You should be able to make it expressive of yourself and your own needs and desires. So F1s should exist.
That's an extremely valid argument, and I think it's just a disclaimer on that. People need to be educated on what the first generation breeding stock is and what the intention is, and knowing that, hey, if you want what I bred, because this may not represent what I bred, you may find a variation that's a little different. If you're going into it for a Charizard, you may get yourself a Pikachu, brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of one of
With
those
joy.
things. With joy, though, you may love Pikachu.
Mm-hmm.
That may be your dude, but I'm going for Charizard. You know, so it's kind of one of those things. I think that's where I've had the pleasure to be able to grow F2, and now I have F3s of Chill Out OG, and my variables did not change very much at all. It was P had the one dramatic shift, totally different one, and I think that was just the phenotype based on his environment and how it changed a little bit, and being in that basement that's pretty much a canitrol. Like it's that may be part of it, you know.
I agree.
Let's do a giveaway.
Let's give some shit away. What else we got? We got a giveaway going here, and afterwards, if you're watching this back, you still can win something. Drop some value in the comment section. Add to the conversation. Don't just put comment or dope show. Appreciate the dope show. Thank you guys. Lots of great feedback. But add something to the conversation. Keep it flowing.
Mm-hmm. This one's going to be USA and Canada only. And let's do Stash Blend. Let's give away a bag of Stash Blend.
Yeah. Stash Blend. Yes.
Let's do it. Stash Blend. Let's go, baby. So what's our question? What's our question now? What is our question? Which substance is commonly used to make a female plant produce pollen? A, colloidal silver. B, Brando. C, vinegar. D, honey water. What do you think it is? A, B, C, or D? Put your answer in the chat. You've probably seen this, heard this before. I'm actually trying to think, did we actually touch on this?
In the very beginning, yeah.
We did. Yeah, we did. I just want to make sure they were listening. They were listening. I mean, honestly, episodes like this, when I watch things like this, dude, I went back, I shit you not, I took notes. I don't even make hash, but I'm going to probably with this next batch of stuff from the episode of Swank. I went back and watched it and took notes because there were certain things that I remember him saying, but I couldn't remember.
The grit of the trichome is always pretty big on that one.
The gritty.
But A is your answer, guys. A is your answer. So all you had to do was put A in the chat. Autobots, roll.
Electrolytes. Yep, and we're going to pick one random person. Shout out to AC Infinity for taking care of the back end of this side of things. Our producers, Sid the Kid and Wink on the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s.
Hell yeah.
And Rondo does have what plants crave. Everybody knows. I'm glad we have some people who are cultured.
Oh, shit. It's got electrolytes is the winner?
Tardy's Garden.
No.
Oh,
Tardy's
I was
Garden.
like, oh, okay. I was like, well, that was a name?
Garden.
Tardis, congratulations. Tardis Garden. Congratulations on your dub.
Reach
I'm
out
not the
to
brightest bulb in the
giveaways
box.
at acinfinity.com. Little screenshot, just making sure it's you. We don't want some lying here. But yeah.
And a shipping address. I noticed ACI put there in the chat. Don't leave a blank email. Put your shipping address in there with a screenshot of who's the winner. If you're going to get
something, guys, you should think about when you're getting something.
And then send it to giveaways at acinfinity.com. And of course, as I mentioned, if you didn't win a giveaway, you have the opportunity to still save at acinfinity.com. Use promo code THESTASH15. Save yourself some coin and help support the show, guys. Thank you. Much appreciated, everybody that steps up. We got more to talk about, baby.
So yeah, we're to the point now. What are you gonna do? Your plants, you got these buds full of seeds, and trust me, I was recently there, and it was so intimidating because I was like, "This will be easy. I'll just shake it out." And I'm like, "Oh shit!" And then it's sticky, but like it's still female bud, mind you. So I'm sitting there like, "Oh, just wring it out," and it's sticking together. I'm making chara hash in my hands. Chris, you got the most experience in this because you've been able to separate your fourth generation of seeds now. Let's dive a little bit into this portion of extracting and getting it.
Okay. Well, first, I think one of the questions would be kind of how do you feed those plants throughout the grow cycle? You know,
Oh yeah, before we even get there, it's a good point. It's a good point.
yeah, yeah.
Back me up.
So
Back me up.
we get a lot of questions with, one of the things that I heard from a breeder, which I thought was super interesting, is for the plants that he's pollinated, he keeps them on a veg feeding schedule throughout the entire life, right? So he doesn't drop down the nitrogen at all. He just keeps that nitrogen up, keeps on a veg feeding for the entire way through. And other folks will go by the typical feeding chart to where the nitrogen gets reduced and then there's more phosphorus and potassium. But I think I mentioned that one. That is a strategy, and that's something I've been doing. And this particular breeder swears that he gets not only more developed seeds, but they're more of like the tiger striped style ones versus you can get like faded grays with like no tiger stripes on them. So figure I'd throw that out there. As far as how long to flower the plant for, that might be another question. You're not going to really go by your typical flower window that the breeder suggests, right? The breeder's recommendation, because you've got seeds forming in there. I think the general way is after you've done the pollination, at least 8 weeks from that point, right? So you're taking, if you pollinate at the 4 week mark, for example, day 28, roughly, then you're going up till what, 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks, and then you're harvesting. So 12, 13, some people show 14 weeks. I just harvested something that was at, I think, 13 weeks. And I want to make sure that more seeds are developed than underdeveloped. You'll still get some underdeveloped stuff that's duds, but the longer you push that plant, you can even push it to the point where it's barely uptaking water. The leaves are starting to decay and it's really just looking bad. You don't care about that, right? You shouldn't really care about conserving the flower. At least I don't. I know some people might, but conserving that flower, I just consider that a dead plant. I'm only looking for the seeds to that point. So pushing that plant so it develops the amount of seeds, maximum amount of seeds is important for many breeders. Now, as far as harvesting, when you do get to the point of harvesting and drying, for example, what do? You're going to put it in a 60/60? No. What you're going to do is, well, at least what I do, is I try to get it dry as quickly as I possibly can. I am fortunate enough to live in a very dry climate. It's about 25 to 35% relative humidity. So I am thrilled that I'm able to dry out these plants as fast as possible. 3, 4, 5 days. I want these plants to be as crumbly as possible because what I'm going to do is take those seeds. What is it called? Shucking, where you like stripping off the buds from the stems. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shucking, and then taking those buds and just going like this and crumbling everything up.
Okay.
So your plant material is separating from the actual seeds. And if they're good, viable seeds, they're not going to get destroyed off of you going like that, right? The good seeds are gonna be good still. After I have everything crumbled up, then I'm putting it through a seed sorter. Some people are manually sorting it, right? They're separating the plant material using like a little card or something and physically separating it. Or you can get a seed sorter. You can search on YouTube, seed sorter. I think they call it seed cleaner as well. And you can see there are several different style of these machines that sort the seeds. You basically put in that crushed up plant material and seeds, put it into the system, and it actually uses wind, air, and it's going to blow all that light material up over into one area, and then the seeds are too heavy, so they're going to drop down individually into another bucket, for example. That's just one of the machines. That's the machine that I have, and it saves so much time to have one of those machines. So yeah, that's how I go about kind of the feedings and harvesting and sorting the
Damn
seeds
this,
or
bro.
whatever.
I messed up. I pulled my plant based on the flower being finished. Pure
Uh,
ignorance. Pure ignorance. And this is why look things up. I just can't feel like I was bothering Chris. I was asking him random questions about stuff, and I'm like, nah, I don't. He feels like he's learning too, but I just need to learn where he's at. Like I'm copying his homework. He's already been in this class. I just started in this class mid-year, you know. But yeah, somebody in the chat, man, the chat's going crazy. But shout out to you. I forgot. Yeah, you are right. Debucking. So there's debucking machines which are atrocious. You see in commercial grows, they're
That's what it's
scary.
called.
And then shucking being for the stem. So yeah, different.
Got
Nice.
it. Okay.
So that's where it comes down to.
I
harvest-
particularly enjoy that Chris asked us a question and we both answered very confidently. And we're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job, Chris.
I don't work in
It's
commercial
your fault.
facilities. so I
Like
don't know.
shucking.
Moving on.
Shucking. You know? Now, people will oftentimes, thinking about this because you don't need to dry your flower the same way because you're not trying to preserve cannabinoids. It's maintaining the right dry temperature and climate for your plants. Would you recommend leaving it in your tent and just shutting down the lights and keeping the environment where it's at, or lowering the humidity even more? Because in your
I'd
case, you
lower-
should open the tent and it's fucking dry as can be.
What I do is I keep the tent closed, have 2 oscillating fans on, and just have them blowing all over. I don't care if it's on the buds or not. I know when you're doing a flower run, you don't want that oscillating fan on the buds. Have the air circulation going on. I have my inline fan on a 1 at all times, so it's constantly ejecting that air outside of my house, so that smell is gone too. And then yeah, just letting it dry, as much, not running a humidifier at all, because I live in a dry climate. But if you're in a more humid climate, you probably have to run a dehumidifier, right, to get it to dry quicker.
That's where I was at because I didn't care as much about the flowers, so I had the dehumidifier going and it was sucking just so much water out of the air, but the plant was drying up dramatically fast. But it was still really sticky, so extracting the seeds for me was a headache. I did it ghetto style with my hands and a cardboard box setup that I built via a video I saw on YouTube. So there's DIY methods if you're just doing it for yourself, but proper extraction, you're going to want to get the most you can out of the plant. So follow what Chris said. Mine's 100% just dude bro in the shed style. So
And that's okay. That's why there's beginners methods, and that's why we can have conversations like this on the internet. And
it's
those
dangerous on the internet.
Yeah, perhaps it could be, but I think it's important that conversations like this exist so that people aren't intimidated to try to jump into this with both feet. Because I can't find a breeder or a farmer that'll tell you otherwise. But more people should be breeding. More people should be trying to find a way to express themselves through the plant. More people should be trying to find ways to find things in the plant that have not yet been discovered. Because honestly, it's still the green rush. I feel like we're so juvenile in regards to our search for cannabinoids and terpenes. And I think with the more and more people that we have experimenting, it's almost like we have more and more scientists that are doing little experiments that are kind of finding their way. So I enjoy these kind of conversations, even if they're at the most basic level. But we should continue it. Storing though.
I was just going to
sorry.
say storing. Somebody was asking about storing pollen earlier, and just real quick, if we're going to talk about storage, so female storage, end storage, clones, right? You're going to keep the clones. The seeds, you want to store them just like you would long-term seed storage, right? Cool areas, dark, dry, and you want to maintain the consistent. It doesn't have to be like it's buds, you know what I'm saying? 'Cause you're not preserving cannabinoids, but you want to preserve the healthiness and in the viability of actually germination for these seeds. But for your male plant, pollen storing, I was going over the top thinking I had to do that. And then shout out to the homie Swank. He's like, why don't you just clone the male? Like, yes.
Keep
And
the
then
male
Chris,
around. Yeah.
yeah. This is a thing that I'm like, how the hell do you do it? How you're growing flower again and you're keeping pollen around, brother? No, I'm just dumb.
No, it's because
Yeah.
we're having this conversation. It's the little things that get missed. You're thinking grand scheme of things. We always overthink. I think it's just by nature. So it's to think, someone who's been doing it's going to understand that there's a few shortcuts to take that don't jeopardize the overall result. One of those things is cloning the male. Don't store your pollen, just clone your male. Time it out, right?
If you
What-
do
what-
want to store the pollen, if you don't have the ability to clone the male and keep the male around for whatever reason, plant count or whatever, you can store pollen. I've done it several times in the past. Basically, what I'll do is I'll put it in a plastic baggie or a glass jar and put it in the fridge. Put it in the fridge, try to keep it as moisture free as possible. I was told it lasts about 6 months at the max. I used pollen that was almost a year old, pollinated a plant and got seeds off of it. So I guess the jury's still out on how long a pollen is still viable within within the refrigerator there, storing it in there. But yeah, for me, it's been almost a year, and I was still able to use pollen. It was still viable at that point, which I didn't think it was going to be. But
Dude,
I
that's nuts.
tested. I didn't just go with the status quo. I ended up, challenging the status quo and trying it out and seeing what happens. And that's one thing that I feel like everybody needs to do is don't just agree with what's on the internet, right? Try things out, experiment yourself, because there is a lot of wrong information on the internet. And you might read something and say, oh, no, this is
Shocking.
the way it is. But if you challenge it and do it, you might find out that that's not the way it is. So, yeah, anyways, just figured
No,
I'd mention
totally
that.
agree.
Dude, the wisdom's there. We've been wrong on things. We oftentimes do stuff, and sometimes it's anecdotal evidence, and that's the thing where the more we go into it, this being a beginner breeding episode is perfect because we're all on that point. Me and P definitely way more rookie than Chris, but Chris still is too modest to give himself credit as being someone who's knowledgeable and knows his shit. Having the experience of getting something that goes to market successfully, and all of us have grown it. Like so many people in the chat, us three here. Like, I mean, it's enough that the viability of the genetic is amazing, and to see it continue is just really cool, man. It's inspiring, for sure.
Totally
Brother.
agree.
Yeah, the amount of knowledge that comes with breed. I mean, there's so many things that we obviously didn't cover in this episode. I mean, this is just kind of a beginner scratch the surface type thing. The knowledge goes on and on and on. There are complete books out there that you can buy with just all the details about cannabis breeding. And actually, one that I recommend if you do if you do read books, is it's called Cannabis Breeding by James Loud. That's something that I'm reading right now. Just came out this year, actually, 2024. And so much good information in there. So if anybody is a reader, check that one out.
I like how you say it,
James
like
Loud.
who reads?
James Loud. He's got his
James
own.
Loud
Yeah.
Genetic.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
got his
Yeah.
own
Got a
genetics.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
if you're
I
looking for
recognize
more
that name right away.
advanced, he probably would have more advanced stuff. Not to leave this channel, stay on AC Infinity's channel. We will have a guest on eventually for some more advanced stuff. You know, if you guys want to see that, let us know in the comment section. But
100.
there's other channels like Vader OG, Vader Vision is one that's old school, been around for a while, and very, very educated and knowledgeable, and a great teacher. I'd recommend that. Zaza's channel as well, getting into the nitty gritty of genetics and breeding as a whole, not just our favorite plant, obviously. There's a lot of great information out there.
And if you
I think
tuned in
this-
last, sorry. If
I
you
was
tuned
gonna
in
say, I think
last
this
week,
arms you enough. I'm finishing it now. Now you
Dude,
left me enough
got it. You
space.
gotta commit.
You left me enough space. If you're armed with enough information here, it'll make it so you can understand some of the stuff there, because it's hard to digest when you're hearing words that you've never heard. Now you.
Totally agree. Appreciate that. No, what I was going to say isn't important. No, if you tuned in last week, we spoke to the homie Swank. He also says he's always open to conversation. If you wanted to reach out to him, Swank Genetics on Instagram, he's always open to having a good quality conversation about the plant
If he has good internet.
and the passion. Yeah. But let's do another giveaway, boys. Let's do another giveaway.
Let's
Send this
cap
out
this
here.
off with a giveaway. Remember, you can also get discounts on any of these products that you don't win. The Stash 15 on AC Infinity's website, or drop a comment below in the comment section. You might win something.
100%. What do we got? Throw it up,
guys. I can't read.
We got
Let's do it.
another Suncore A5, the heat mat and the humidity dome. So that's what we're giving away this time around.
Let's go. Let's go. All
USA,
you gotta do is put
Canada
a
only.
How should plant seeds be stored for long-term viability? In a humid place, in a cool, dark, dry place, in a jar outside, under a lamp? A, B, C, or D, just put the answer in the chat. If you guys, while we're rolling this for the next 20 seconds, don't forget, Thursday, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the premiere of Scrog School coming back. That's Thursday, guys. The link is
7
already
p.m.
up.
Eastern Standard Time.
Thank you. The link will be up, ready to go, so make sure you check that out. Tea with P is live tomorrow, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central, so you'll be there for that. B is your answer: in a cool, dark, dry place. Shout out to everyone who tuned into the chat this evening. You guys are absolute legends. We appreciate you guys for tuning in.
Amazing people. You're beautiful.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. And no matter what's going on in the world right now, just remember that we appreciate you guys for tuning in here, bringing an honest conversation, supporting us in front and behind the scenes. It's absolutely incredible. Wink's a hell of a dude. We appreciate him for putting on the show. The winner is
on the ones and twos in the back.
And Sid the
winner
kid
is Thursday
And
at
the winner
7 p.m. Scrog School, the apprentice season.
The apprentice
The Apprentice
season.
season. It's going to be a banger. Cat W has won the giveaway. Cat
Cat
Williams.
W. Cat
Congratulations.
W. Congratulations. Congratulations. Don't forget
Yeah.
to email a screenshot of yourself logged in. Giveaways at acinfinity.com. Send them your mailing address. And then that way you get everything that you need to have them send you something.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, man. Make sure you guys, again, drop a comment below, something to add to the conversation even more in depth, because, again, you could still win yourself something amazing as well. We'll be back again next week with another more advanced episode, and I think you guys will enjoy it.
Yeah.
We're going to be dropping a new episode on Sunday as well from the stash. Check it out on all streaming platforms. A banger.
I actually just dropped a link right now. I just dropped a video
You got a new video too?
myself. Brand new video. Just dropped it right now. Just for you guys. I want you guys to throw down in the chat once you showed up that ACI sent me. Okay? Put it in the chat. Don't forget, comments underneath this video are eligible for a giveaway as well for a $100 store credit. All you got to do is add a little bit to the conversation and just be a good soul. We appreciate you. We appreciate you guys.
I got to go deal with these wild ass kids, but I appreciate everybody who tuned in. For From the Stash, it's your boy Rob, Mr. Grow Up Pigeon 420. Wink on the ones and twos. We'll see you guys next week. Stay lifted.
Peace.
Peace.